Okay, here we go.
My 9-year-old is singing in the other room, so I will make sure to mute myself as the presentation gets started. It is just after 1 o'clock, and so I do want to be respectful of all of our afternoons here. That is 1 o'clock Eastern. And thank you everybody who is joining from many different areas. Anyway, I'd like to say hello and welcome to everybody today. This webinar is sponsored by the Teaching Statistics and Health Sciences section of the American Statistical Association. My name is Lila Poisson and I'm the current section chair. I'd like to welcome you to this webinar, and if you're not a current member of the section, I'd like to encourage you to consider joining. We host a number of activities throughout the year and work to build a community of statistical educators who are primarily working in health sciences. Though we also host the resource portal, which you'll be hearing about today. So this is a great place to look for real-world data for your courses. For more information about our section, you can visit our blog or website, and all of those links are on the page. Amy, if you could jump forward to the next slide for me. Because next week we are starting JSM, and that will be virtual. We hope we'll be able to see some of you at our virtual JSM. We have details and various resources available on our webpage. So again, there is the link. And our annual business meeting and mixer, where you can learn more about what's happening in our section and learn about opportunities for leadership, opportunities for volunteering, and just get to meet some more folks, will be Monday evening. So the benefit for this being virtual is that it is not directly linked to JSM, so registration is not required. So if you want to learn more about TSHS, that's another great opportunity. So the link there will take you to a recap form, much like you used for this webinar, to bring you the Zoom link information. Okay, so today's webinar, the format is going to be that our speaker will present slides and then followed by 10 to 15 minutes of discussion and question and answers. We will have all attendees muted during the presentation. And if you have questions, we ask that you please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and enter your question there. Our speaker will be answering some questions during the presentation if they are immediately relevant to the material on screen or waiting to the end to have a more in-depth conversation about some of the questions. We ask that you please don't use the chat button for doing questions because we won't be monitoring the chat window specifically. Again, the Q&A button is the place to go for asking questions of the speakers. So today we welcome Dr. Amy Nowacki and Dr. Carol Bigelow. Amy Nowacki is an associate faculty member in biostatistics at the Lerner Research Institute at Cleveland Clinic. And Amy is also the past chair of the TSHS section, so she's wrapping up her leadership role with us in a few months. Carol Bigelow is a research associate professor at the School of Public Health Sciences at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she's currently co-chair of the TSHS research portal that we'll be learning about today. So today, Amy's going to be sharing the presentation, exploring and utilizing the TSHS resource portal, while Carol manages the Q&A window. So as we go along, again, please make sure you're asking your questions in the Q&A box. So with that, I thank you both for doing this today. And Amy, if you could take it away.
Thanks, Lila. I really appreciate that. So welcome, everybody. I am so glad that you've joined us this afternoon for an introduction and exploration of the TSHS resources portal. As educators, I think probably everybody who's attending this session could probably agree that at some point or other, they have spent an entire afternoon looking for a data set that they could use in their course. I know that when I first got hired, I spent many, many afternoons searching the web, looking on different websites or people where people have posted data sets, and I've become often very discouraged. Namely because I would find broken links, or I would find a data set that looked really awesome, but there was no data dictionary, so I didn't know what any of the variables actually meant, or I just didn't have any background for the data set. So I really struggled. And so apparently I was not alone, because it was shortly after that that I found other members of the TSHS community who were working on addressing that problem. And their solution was to create what we call the TSHS resources portal. And so that's what I'm going to be introducing you to today. And so first of all, just what is the TSHS portal? Well, it's a repository of vetted, ready to use, and relevant data sets for teaching, plus a few companion teaching resources for use by two types of users, public and teachers only. Now I know that that is a lot to take in, so I just kind of want to describe it and break it down. So at our portal, the repository contains only vetted data sets. So each one of these data sets has been reviewed by ad hoc reviewers, and there is an editorial board that approves all of them. So they all have gone through quality checks. It's ready to use. What I mean by that is you will find, as I will demonstrate in just a few moments, that each of the data sets is fully annotated, which means that it contains an abstract and a vignette describing the context of where the data came from. It provides a data dictionary, and if possible, it gives you a publication citation. The data sets are typically cleaned, and the reason I say typically is because every once in a while, we'll receive a data set where one of the learning objectives is to teach our students how to do some data cleaning. And so there are a small handful of data sets that are intentionally kept, quote unquote, dirty, so that there's that opportunity for that learning experience. But the vast majority of them are already cleaned, and they are formatted to the software of choice. So we welcome people who use any sort of software, and we provide 6 options: R, SAS, Stata, SPSS, Minitab, and Excel. This makes it very user-friendly no matter what type of software you have at your disposal. Relevant. So TSHS stands for Teaching Statistics in the Health Sciences. So we are focused on health sciences data sets. However, even if you are not teaching health science students, every student has been to a doctor, so they're at least familiar with the health system. And so you might still be able to find some data sets that are helpful for your courses, even if you are not specifically focused on health science students. However, when you are teaching health science students, usually they're very focused in that they want their data sets and their classroom activities to be relevant to what they're studying. And so it's not as engaging for them if we are using Titanic data, for example. But it is more engaging if we try to bring it to the kind of topics that they would be using when they finish their studies. So I mentioned also companion teaching resources. So these are a variety of things. It could be projects, it could be different homework sets, it could be PowerPoint slides, test questions, etc. However, they all have to be data set specific. So they have to be connected with one of our data sets. And so these are available for some currently, and we would love to continue to grow that feature. And the last part I want to highlight is the users. So we kind of consider there to be 2 types of users for the TSHS portal. The first type is just a public user. So this is somebody who jumps onto the website and they've not registered or anything, and they can access all of the data sets and all of the annotation that accompany those data sets. So you do not ever have to sign up for any sort of membership or login if you only are interested in obtaining the data sets. Those are available for everyone. So even your students would be able to come to this website and download a data set. We have a second level, which we call registered or members, but it's completely free. So there's no cost to this. The only reason that we do this is because we have built in a check so that we can just ensure that you are one of the teachers and not one of the students, so that we can provide the teaching resources to those who can confirm that they are in fact an educator. Because obviously we would not like all of our solutions to these projects or homeworks to become just available to anyone on the web. A little bit later, I'm going to return to show you exactly where you go and what basically the 30 seconds that it takes to request membership so that you can have access to the teaching resources as well, if that's of interest to you. But again, if you're only interested in the data sets, those are open and available to the entire public, and there's no need to log in. So where is the TSHS portal located? So here's the website, www.causeweb.org/TSHS. And we'd like to give a very special thank you to Dr. Dennis Pearl, who is at the Department of Statistics at Penn State College. He is the director of CAUSE, which stands for Consortium for the Advancement of Undergraduate Statistics Education. And they have so graciously agreed to host our website there. And so this is the location, and I'm going to take you there in just one moment. But before I do that, I just want to take a moment to kind of tell you a little bit about the structure of what you're about to see. So this little schematic, basically when I type in www.causeweb.org/TSHS, it'll take me to the welcoming page here. And so I'll show you that in a moment. And on the welcoming page, we have two options. We can choose to browse or search. And in this schematic, the red arrows mean that there's a link, a live link there, that if you do one of those actions, it'll take you to another page. And so if you browse, basically what that means is you're going to be taken to a second page that contains an entire list of all of the available data sets. Okay. If you choose that you would like to not look at all of them, but you have some very specific criteria, that is when you would choose to do a search. So you would type in your specific criteria, and it would then take you to a subsetted list of the entire, of all the data sets. I'm going to demonstrate both approaches and how functionality works with those in just one moment. But when you are at the dataset list, you can then click on any one of the data sets, and it will take you to their dataset home. Okay, so each of the data sets has its own home page. And what is provided within each one of those home pages are the same type of information. And so I've shown that here in the very center of the slide. On any one of the dataset home pages, you will see that there is a section called the abstract, which is a very succinct description of that dataset and study. There's also information about the contributor of the dataset, the background, so a brief background about the context of the study, the objective of that particular study. There's also then clickable links where you can get information on the subjects and variables, and that will take us to, there is an introduction page and the data dictionary. There's also a section called data downloads, and that's where if you click on that, it'll allow you to download any of our 6 formats. And then also, if there happens to be teaching resources for that particular data set, you can click there and it would take you to resources 1, 2, however many there happen to be. So the main reason I bring this schematic up is I just wanted to emphasize that the whole structure of the portal is data set centric. So we're really focused on each of these data sets. So with that now, I am going to switch over. Okay, so I just opened up a browser. Please somebody jump in and let me know, Carol, if for some reason you cannot see my web browser now. But I've just opened up any browser, and I'm going to go up to the top, and here I'm going to type in, so www.causeweb.org/TSHS. Okay. And so now after typing that in, you can see that I've landed on the welcome page. Okay. I'd like to draw your attention to that we have 4 tabs up top here. So this is the home, the welcome page. There's also a tab for browsing the resources. There's a tab for membership and a tab for contributions or submissions. So I'll talk about each of these tabs throughout the presentation today, but I just want to get you familiar. So we have a nice little welcome message here to our section, and you can see our mission. So our mission here is that we want to promote excellence in the teaching of statistics in the health sciences through the dissemination of peer-reviewed, approved teaching materials that are centrally archived in a public domain, easy to navigate website. So that is our goal. Another nice feature about the welcome page is on the right-hand side, you're viewing, hopefully, a small slideshow where you can see that it is going through some of our different data sets. Down below, it gives the title of the data set. So for example, right here, obstetrics and periodontal is one particular data set. And then below that are a couple key features or words associated with that data set. If you happen to see one that you really like, it's wonderful that you can just put your cursor on it and click on the picture, and it'll take you to that home page for that particular data set. Over here on the left, you can see we have the option to browse the resources. Remember, if you click here for browse, or if you go up here to the top and click browse, either of these 2 links will take you to the same place. That will take you to a list, a complete or full list of all of our data sets. So I'm going to click here on browse. And so now I'm at the browse the list of all of the data sets. Currently, there are 13 curated data sets. Okay, and so I could scroll down and I can see each one of them listed out here. If you get to the bottom, this page can only hold 10. So then if you want to see the rest of them, you would click here on older posts because it has them in order of when they were contributed or submitted. So the 10 newest ones are shown on the first page. I click on older posts and it takes me to where the 3 older posts are for a total of my 13 data sets. Okay, so this is where you go, the browse resources, if you just want to look at all available data sets. But let's imagine for a moment that you came to the portal today and you had a specific kind of topic that you were interested in. And you didn't want to just browse all of the data sets, but you wanted to do a search. Okay, so there are a number of ways that you could search. You could search by statistical topic. So say, for example, I was planning to teach a session on the t-test. I could type that in, and I could see that now it took me to a page that only lists the data sets which have the keyword t-test, which means these are data sets where part of the research question could be addressed with a t-test. Okay. Imagine for a moment that I wanted to prepare something for a logistic regression session. I could click on that and you can see that it'll then only bring up the ones that would be appropriate for logistic regression. Okay. Last but not least, let's see, maybe I wanted to do a survival analysis. And now it has selected ones for which survival analysis might be appropriate. So that's a really nice feature to be able to search on very specific statistical keywords or topics. You could, however, maybe be interested in searching for a particular study design. So maybe I am interested in a randomized controlled trial. And so here it brings up all of the randomized controlled trials that we have data on. Or maybe I'm interested in a cohort. You can see that obviously it's changing the available data sets to match the type of study design. Finally, another third example, let's suppose I want to do a longitudinal study. So currently we only have one, but we have a tumor growth study, longitudinal. So if you've got a longitudinal study, please consider submitting. We'd love to have more. So it's kind of very convenient that you could search on statistical topic, you can search on study design. Finally, you could also choose to search on a particular medical topic. So for example, if I was interested in heart disease, it would bring up, no surprise, the Framingham data set available for us. What if I wanted to do something like surgery? You can see that there's a number that bring up that have to do with surgeries, or maybe anesthesia. And so it brings up those. So it's very convenient and flexible in that you have lots of different search options, whether that be by statistical topic, study design, or medical topic. Okay, so let's imagine that I'm teaching a class, a biostatistics class, and the topic coming up was non-parametric methods. Okay, so maybe I already have my PowerPoint put together, and I want to create maybe an activity or a project for the students so that they can then demonstrate that what they've learned in the classroom session, they can demonstrate those new skills. So for example, I might come here and start out by saying non-parametric. And because I'm interested in a specific topic, I would use the search as opposed to the browse. So I go to the search and I see that there's a couple of options, okay? So this looks interesting, a smart pill. Okay, so I can click here on the link of the name of the data set, or I can actually click on the picture. And it takes me to the dataset homepage for smart pill. Okay, so I want to go through again what you saw in the structure. There's an abstract section, which again just gives you a very brief description of what this data set pertains to. You can see the keywords are listed here. So some of them are study design keywords, some are topic, so medical topic keywords, and some are statistical method keywords. Okay, so I see that non-parametric is there, and that's probably why, or that's exactly why it came up under my search. Down below the abstract, there's a small section where it tells you who the contributor is. So someone named Amy Nowacki, okay, at the Cleveland Clinic, submitted this one. And then also what's helpful is it gives you basically some information about how you can cite the use of these data sets. There's a background section. So this gives you, fleshes out a little bit more about why this study was conducted. And then an objective section, which is telling you what was the goal of this study? Why did they undertake this and collect this data in the first place? Okay, so the Smart Pill study is basically a study that was looking to describe the first use of a new motility capsule to compare the gastric emptying and small bowel transit times in critically ill trauma patients with intracranial hemorrhage, and comparing those things to healthy volunteers. Down below, you can see the subjects and variables section, where we see that the subject is critical care. There are 95 observations in this data set, so there are 95 subjects. This data set contains 22 different variables, so this is a multivariable data set. And then here are the two clickable links. I can click here on the study introduction, and every data set will have this, okay? So here's the introduction, where again, it summarizes a lot of the information that I just went over. There's the abstract, the background, the objective. Here's the study design. This is a prospective cohort study. Talks a little bit more information about those individual variables and the subjects. And then also it provides the citation. So I find this incredibly helpful. Here's the resulting publication from this research study. And so if I was so inclined, I could go then look up and obtain the publication. So that's the study introduction page. Alternatively, I might want to look at the data dictionary. So I click there. And this is what any teacher dreams of, is seeing a beautiful, clean data dictionary that tells you the name of the variable, okay, the variable label, because sometimes these names aren't that helpful. GE time, I would have no idea what that actually meant unless I had this available to tell me that this is the gastric emptying time, which is the time from ingestion of the pill to the gastric emptying. For the numeric variables, it tells you the units with which these are measured. And for the categorical variables, it tells you what all of the codes represent. And so this is the same format that you'll see all of the data dictionaries following. So that's the subjects and variables section. Then down below is the data download section, where we can see there's those 6 different types of formats. So if you wanted an Excel file, you could just click here, and then it would basically open up an Excel version of the data set for you. And then at the very bottom, this data set does not happen to have any teaching resources currently available for it. But if there were, and I'll show you some examples of that in a few moments, they would be listed here. Okay, so with this, I would be able to pull off the information that I needed to now create my student project. So it's exactly what I started to do. So I took this Smart Pill data set, and basically I wanted to give them an opportunity to apply in a real context, non-parametric test methods. So I created a project where I asked them to conduct a few analyses. And I am just a big fan of having students see published results and trying to reproduce them or match them. It can be an incredible learning experience for them and really an ego boost for them, because it's very exciting for them when they realize, hey, I can actually create these sort of tables, or I can do the kind of analyses that I'm reading about in the literature. Here's a sample. This happens to be the first question that I have them do in this project that I created. And so you can see it says, it's important for the critically ill patients and the healthy volunteers to be as similar as possible so that differences in the outcomes are attributable to the group effect. Such demographic and clinical comparisons are presented in Table 1 of the study publication. Similarly, test whether the groups differ with respect to gender and try to reproduce their results in Table 1. So I'm focusing the students here on the first demographic, which is sex, and we can see that in the critical care group, there are 6 males and 2 females. And in the healthy controls, there were 48 males and 39 females. So I want the students to basically verify those numbers as well as obtain this p-value. So here we have, a p-value of 0.46. So this gave the students a great opportunity to apply something we had already learned in the course, and that is basically looking at a contingency table. There's the numbers they need, the 2 and the 6, the 39 and the 48. Those are all the counts for males and females. They also needed to figure out what was an appropriate analysis. So they had to think to themselves, I'm comparing 2 groups with respect to a binary variable, categorical variable. So this would be chi-square or Fisher's exact. And then they would have to check assumptions. And here we see that in this particular example, the expected counts are quite small for 2 of the 4 cells. And so chi-square would be suspect. And so this is a great opportunity for them to do a Fisher's exact test. And you can see the result down here, 0.46, which matches the p-value they saw in the table, and the students get really excited. So this is just a sample. Here's another question. This was question 4 on that same project. The first question, as you saw, did not require non-parametric, but here's the particular question that focused on that. So the primary outcomes of gastric emptying time and small bowel transit time were compared between the critically ill patients and healthy volunteers. Results are reported in Table 2 of the study publication. Confirm all of the descriptive statistics reported for the primary outcomes and reproduce the p-values. Show your work. So this is, again, a situation where I'm asking them to confirm the descriptive statistics, which we see here are medians and interquartile ranges. And then also to reproduce these p-values. And so they have to recognize what would be appropriate statistical tests in this situation. So I'm going to focus just an example quickly on the gastric emptying time, the first one. So they have an opportunity to gather their descriptive statistics. And one thing that I love about this particular example is that in the actual study, there were 8 critically ill, reported study, there were 8 critically ill patients. And the data set, however, only contains 7. So the median is correct, but the lower and upper quartile don't match. And so first of all, students often say, oh, did I do something wrong? But then they take time to say, well, no, I got this right. The volunteers' values all match. And then it leads them to explore and figure out, oh, there's one person missing. And then to get that p-value, they would want to go on to figure out what type of test, if you're comparing 2 groups with a numeric variable, would you want to do, a t-test or a non-parametric? There's a very small group here of only 7, so they might choose non-parametric. and then conduct that rank sum test, and they get a p-value that matches what was shown in the table. So it's kind of exciting for the students to be able to reproduce what's in the tables. However, not all of my questions ask them to reproduce, or projects ask them to reproduce what was already published. That's just one option. Okay, so that was one scenario where I have kind of used the data sets to create projects for my students. Let's now imagine a second scenario. You're asked to come and give a talk to, say, internal medicine noon conference, and they're asking you to give a talk regarding databases. So you're asked to come give a talk about databases. So I'm putting together this talk, Introduction to Databases and Data Security. Doesn't that sound exciting? And I'm thinking about my objectives for this talk. I want them to be able to identify best practices for data collection. I want them to be able to discuss the importance of secure quality data. And I want them to be able to describe some of the features of REDCap, which happens to be at the clinic, the particular database system we use. So I could go through and put them all to sleep by going through all of the recommendations from the IRB of what you should and shouldn't do. Or I could try to keep them awake and help them see that this is something they're going to need to do when they're trying to conduct their own research. So I could put it in the context of an actual research study. So that's exactly what I chose to do. And so I decided, hey, I bet I could find a really great study if I go to the TSHS portal. So here I am on the home page, okay? And now I really don't have a specific topic. So I'm just going to use the browse resources. I know that I'm giving a talk to residents. So I'm just gonna hit the browse. And I'm gonna scroll down, see if something's interesting. I could read the little abstracts. Let's see here. How about, oh, surgery. Okay, a bunch of them would be possibly interested in this. So let me check out the surgery timing. So now it takes me to the dataset homepage. Again, it follows the same structure. Here's my abstract and the keywords. Okay, here's the background objective of the study. So this particular study, let's see if it would be of any interest. The study tested the hypothesis that the risk of 30-day mortality associated with elective general surgery increases from morning to evening through the routine workday, increases from Monday to Friday through the work week, and is more frequent in July and August. July and August. So that's when the new residents come. This one might be of interest to my students. So I choose now this data set. Again, I can go here to get the introduction or to get the data dictionary, okay? And down here is all the data set options in the different formats. And so basically I can pull this data set out, download it, and then use it in my presentation. So now in my presentation, I decided to open up by giving them this research scenario. I said, imagine that you're interested in figuring out if surgical outcomes are worse when residents start their new year, you know, in July and August. How would we answer that question? And so then I get them talking about how basically we need to be able to measure surgical outcomes. And often someone will say, well, we could do 30-day mortality because that's a very common outcome. And then I talk to them about, okay, and if we want to know if it's July, August, when residents first start, we need to collect the month of the year that the surgery is performed. And then I said, well, why stop at month? We could also get day of the week. We could also get hour. So we have a conversation about this as if they're planning a study. And then I say, okay, now we need to collect this data. How can we do that? And so we have a conversation about how we want our data set to be set up. Probably many of you have had this conversation. You want each row to be a single record or observation. and you want each column to be one variable. And I can see some people are probably smiling because they've had this conversation where you don't want to put multiple concepts into one column. For example, medication, you don't put the dose and the frequency all in one. Or blood pressure, you don't put systolic and diastolic all together. So I could have this conversation about how we want to collect the data, and we're going to collect, you know, the timing of it. So maybe day of the week. And then I'll say, so you could put in a place where you can record day of the week. If you use a text field, this is what you get. So then we go on to have a conversation about what went wrong, right? And I can talk about when do we use text fields? When is it better to use radio buttons or drop-down menus or things like that? And then this leads me into having a nice conversation about the red cap and how we can construct our databases. And then at the end of this, after we build that database, I can go back and show them, now that you've got your database built, your data is very clean and easy for you to answer the original questions. And so I'm not going into that here today, but this would then allow me to kind of meet the student where their interest is and where they would be applying this in their life. So this was another second example where I used the data sets to really help and prompt those sort of discussions. Okay, so now I'm back. Let me go to the home page. The next thing I wanted to highlight is the teaching resources. So imagine that I wanted to conduct something on linear regression. I type that in for the search, and here's the laryngoscope data set. So I go there. As I scroll down, you can see here's where the teaching resources are located, okay? And it says, please log in or register to download resources. So anybody can access all the data sets, but the teaching resources, as we mentioned, require a login. If you have never used the TSHS resources portal before, you would need to click on register. So if you click register, it'll take you here, okay. Basically, you can see this is it. It asks for your email, your first and last name, your affiliation, and then you create your own password for your account. Then down below, it's just a data use agreement, which basically just says that you're not going to try to use these data sets to make medical claims beyond what the intended purpose was. And then also that you understand that this is under the Creative Commons licensing, so that you're free to use it for your educational activities, but not to try to make money off of them. And then most importantly, you are not a robot. So you click on that. It's really important that you do put your affiliation and your email, that because this submission goes to one of our editorial board members, who then checks to make sure. They would go to your affiliation, make sure that you're listed there as an instructor. It's really helpful if you use not a Gmail, but actually use, like, for example, I would use my CCF, my Cleveland Clinic email address, so that it's easy for them to check it. And this is usually pretty quick turnaround in 48 hours or less. Sometimes, depending on how busy people are, maybe the most it would be a week, but that's more unusual. But especially if you give them your affiliation and a nice email that they can confirm very easily. They would then add you into the system, and then you'll get an automated response from the system saying that you now have access. So this filling this out takes a whole probably 30 seconds, but this is where you would go to gain access. If you have access, like for example, I already have logged in and created an account, then to access the resources, I would click on login. And basically I would, you know, I'm not a robot, I've entered my password, log in. And the only downside about this is that currently it took me, sorry, 1 second, it's slow. Currently it takes you back to the home page. That might be something we'll look into seeing if we can correct or not. So you would just have to remember how to go back to where you were. So I was at the linear regression. And I was at the laryngoscope. And down here, now you see where it says resources. I can click on a link now, they're available, and it opens up a zip file that contains all of the available information. There's a great resource here that Anne Brearley submitted about developing a statistical analysis plan and teaching students how to do that. So that's how you would do the teaching resources. The last thing I wanted to comment on before we open it up for discussion and questions is if you like the idea of this and you like the data sets and you have a data set, consider becoming a contributor. So if you have a data set that you would like to submit, you can go to, again, on the home page, there's those 4 panels. So you would click on 4 contributors. And right here, we can see that there are 3 different submission types that are accepted. You can submit a data set by itself. You can submit a data set with a teaching resource, or you can submit just a teaching resource if it is associated with one of our existing TSHS portal data sets. So those are the 3 types of submissions that we encourage. If you come down here, right here are the instructions, and this walks you through exactly what you have to do to be able to make a submission. So here's the submission instructions. And basically you can see that if you're submitting a data set, there are 5 steps, and it walks you through. All of these templates are found right there in that zip file that I just opened. And if I was submitting a teaching resource, there are 5 steps as well. The last step, whether you're submitting a data set or a teaching resource, is to email your submission, your zip file, to the tshsportal@gmail.com website or web address. And that email will then be received by our TSHS editor, who will then review it and send it out for peer review. We have an editorial board, and 2 to 3 reviewers will look over the data set and all of the materials, just like as if you were submitting a manuscript. They will then give you feedback. And I will say we really want the data sets to be submitted. So I have found this process, the reviewers, to be incredibly supportive and engaged, and they really are just trying to help make it as easy and simple as possible for someone who is just coming to the website to be able to understand your data set and be able to use it quickly. So they will then send back comments. You'll have an opportunity to make any sort of edits or changes. You send it back to submit it, and if they then approve that, it will get accepted and posted on the portal. The cool thing is that this is a peer-reviewed process, an educational resource that you can now list on your CV. And so you can be able to receive credit for going through this process as well. All right. So this is where you would go. These are all under the Creative Commons license. And so we also have, it's a very simple 2 or 3 step process, and we have instructions on exactly how to do that as well. So this is a great site to be able to walk you through that process. And with that, I would like to open it up for questions. Luckily, we have with us, one second here. Luckily, we have with us one of our TSHS editors, and that is Dr. Carol Bigelow from University of Massachusetts Amherst, and she's been kind of manning the Q&A, and so she's here available to also help me answer any questions. Our other current editor is is Ann Brearley from University of Minnesota. And Ann is actually going to be our 2021 TSHS chair. So we're very excited for her leadership in the coming year. So with that, I will be quiet and allow us to have any questions.
Great, thank you, Amy, for a wonderful presentation and letting me off the hook in terms of doing the actual presentation, so I'm delighted. I have been manning the Q&A over the course of your talk, and there were a few questions which I think were terrific. First of all, thank you to everyone for joining us today. We're just delighted. And before I go to the questions, of which there are just a couple, I want to advocate strongly for your thinking about making a contribution to the portal, and to tell you that we are really a very friendly group, and we're delighted if you might be interested in submitting a post. And just to let you know, I would be happy to work closely with anyone who's considering doing a contribution to our portal and making it as smooth and easy as possible. So that's my comment. The first question that I got was from John, and John, I apologize that I didn't jot down your last name, so you're just John. But your question was, do subjects, I assume study participants in the various data sets that are posted, do subjects consent to have their data put into our portal postings? So that's the first question.
Okay, that's a great question. So I would say that no, they are not specifically consented to be part of this. However, we only accept de-identified data sets. So all personal health information or anything that could be potentially identifiable has to be stripped out and removed before we will post them here. We do get then permission from the owner of the data set to be able to post their data after they have published on it or are finished with it. So we receive permission from the owner of the data set, and we remove all personal health information or identifiable information so that it is anonymous in that regard.
Great. The only additional comment I would add to that is that the editorial board has had some discussion about this very issue. And in the development of the portal, we thought about various types of data sets that we would consider being posted and how to get permissions and so forth. And for the moment, we've limited ourselves to publicly available, fully de-identified data sets. That's not to say that we won't branch out and consider more sophisticated data sets, but I think at this point, we're, as Amy says, restricting our posts to fully de-identified data sets for which we've gotten permission from the owner to include them in posts, to the portal. The second question that I got was also an excellent one, which pertains to graduate students who might be doing some teaching. And the question is, can graduate students register to obtain access to the teaching resources? These would be graduate student, I assume, teaching assistants or graduate students who are teaching their own courses.
Yeah, Carol, do you want to take that one?
We would certainly receive the request for permission to access. We might follow up with that individual to get a little bit more information on the details of their role as instructors in the course. So I think the answer is really a tentative yes. So we would encourage graduate students who are doing teaching to absolutely be in touch with us and inquire about obtaining access to teaching resources. It might just take a few additional conversations, but yes, we would encourage that you be in touch with us and request that permission. And those were the two questions that I got. So I don't know if there are any others. I see. So here's a question from Suzanne, who asks, some journals inquire whether the data sets will be available publicly and by what means. Could this website be a good venue to serve both purposes, to make the data available publicly as well as to serve as a teaching tool?
That's a wonderful question. And yes, this would be one way that you could meet your requirement of posting or making your data set publicly available. I know that especially some grants and, as you mentioned, some journals are now requiring or moving towards that. And so this would be one venue or aspect that you could try to do that, with an added bonus that it's peer reviewed, and so you can put a feather on your cap and put it on your CV as well for that process. But yes, this would be one way that you could meet that criteria.
Yes, so thank you for that question. The other question that's come in just now is from Sam, who asks, do we have to use the data set in its entirety, or are we able to generate samples from the data set?
So you have to download the data set in its entirety, but once you have downloaded it, feel free to be able to take a subset or a subsample or only use a couple of the variables. Absolutely, it is up to you to decide how it would best be suitable for you, the purposes of your classroom. So the only thing is that when we do, there were those 6 different files or versions of the files, R, SAS, Excel, so on and so forth. Those are all on the complete data set, but once, as I mentioned, once you've downloaded it, it's up to you how you would like to distribute it or use it in your classroom.
Great, thank you.
I think the only follow-up with that, sorry, Carol, is that if you do decide to use a subset or to edit it or change it in some regard, you'd probably want to let your students know so that way they're not trying to reproduce the publication tables or figures, because they might be banging their head on the desk being, I can't get this number to match, but it might be just because you've chosen to use a subset. So I would probably at least let them know ahead of time.
Great. Okay, the next question, which I can answer or Amy can answer, is from John, who asks, how open are medical researchers with sharing their data? I'm guessing a lot of medical doctors, quote, don't want to be bothered. So my reaction to that is I think it's a reasonable assumption that all of the data set posts that are currently on the portal are coming from contributors who have enjoyed collaborations with medical researchers and other investigators. And as part of that relationship, a nice rapport has been established. And given that the contributor is doing all the work to ready the data set for the portal, and given that we are being very strict about ensuring that only de-identified data are posted, it has not yet been a problem. I don't know whether Amy's experience is different, but that's my answer to that question.
I will say that, so a number of these data sets are ones that I have contributed, and I will say I don't ask all of my collaborators for their data. As Carol mentioned, I kind of pick and choose who I think or feel out that I've had developed a relationship with, that I think they would be open to supporting statistics education. Again, I try to emphasize when I do ask for the data sets that there will be no real work on their part, that I will be doing all the legwork to get the data set and the submission put together and ready. And that their name actually, they get all kind of the credit because, their name in the citation will be there. But I would say that like anything, you just have to kind of, not everybody is open to this. And some people hoard their data. But I think that, there are a number of people who really do want to support education and training. And so you kind of have to kind of feel that out and pick and choose who you inquire with.
The only follow-up comment I would add to that, it occurs to me that possibly a medical researcher might be worried that, oh my goodness, if I allow this data set to be posted, some student's going to do a bunch of analyses and submit a manuscript for publication, and then it'll either be terrible or I'll be scooped or something. And we certainly have safeguards in place for that not to happen, not the least of which is in the initial agreement in the use of the data set that it will be for teaching purposes only. And that's it. Those are the questions that I have. Are there any other questions that participants want to ask?
Well, I think at this point, Carol and Amy, I want to thank you for the presentation today. And I think our participants could reach out to you by email, I suppose, if they have anything further. I know we're hitting the top of the hour, and I want to respect your time and theirs. I would like to remind folks I did put some links in the chat window, but again, we will be having our annual business meeting in Mixer next week that is normally exclusive to the JSM attendees, but because we're virtual, we do not have that requirement. So if you're interested to learn more about TSHS, I do encourage you to come join us there. These slides and presentation have been recorded and will be posted to our website. It's usually done within a week or so. And once that is made available, you will be receiving an email as a registered attendee so that you would know that that's available for you to review. So thank you again, everybody, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming.